Sage Wanderer here, coming at you from my shotgun shack in the Texas Outback. Welcome to another episode of Civil War Update. Today we are discussing the multiple deaths of the double mass shooting that occurred, 2 shootings in one 24-hour period this past Saturday. So, if you listen to the mainstream media, the El Paso shooter was a political terrorist. But the guy in Ohio wasn't. He was just crazy. See, there's a genuine unfairness in the way these things are viewed. I feel like, if anything, the guy in El Paso was more crazy than politically motivated. Now, my reason being is that the reason for saying that is that I'm not saying he wasn't politically motivated. I'm just saying he might have been less politically motivated and more genuinely crazy than the guy in Ohio that shot up the nightclub strip. Now, it's being portrayed in mainstream media the other way around. Like the guy that shot up El Paso was only politically motivated and therefore a terrorist, and the guy in Ohio, we can ignore him because he was just kind of crazy and he shot his sister. Okay? But you're ignoring the political leanings of both people. Now, let's go to the guy in El Paso. What do we really know about him? We are told that he has a political manifesto, right, that he published on 8chan that makes him this racist. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. How do they know he put that on 8chan? I mean, isn't the whole concept of 8chan that it's an untraceable, anonymous posting? Did law enforcement connect those dots? I don't think so. I don't think law enforcement has had time to connect those dots. Those dots are being connected by mainstream media. So somebody produced a manifesto and they've pinned it to this guy, and I don't know how they've done that. I don't know how they've made the guy that went to El Paso a right-wing extremist solely based on an 8chan supposedly completely anonymous posting. Did he sign it? Couldn't you anonymously post something on 8chan and then sign it by me? Right? So we don't really have any what I consider proof of the political leanings at this point. I could be wrong. Correct me in the comment section if you have more information about this El Paso shooter and how they were so quickly able to pin this racist rant from 8chan onto him, because I just don't know how that works. Now, having said that, in contrast, the guy in Ohio was definitely proven and self-acclaimed to be a leftist radical who wanted to kill Trump supporters, who wanted to kill all fascists. And fascists to him were people that supported Trump, people that do not hold the far left, progressive, communist, socialist concept, right? If you're not from that group of extreme political correctness and attacks against freedom of speech, if you're not on the side of the censors, then to them you're a Nazi, you're a fascist, and you deserve whatever you get by any means necessary. So he was one of them. It's all over his social media. He was a supporter of Antifa. So I guess since Antifa isn't, according to law enforcement right now, Antifa is an ideology, it's not a group. Okay, so if Antifa is an ideology and not a group, and he supports Antifa, then that makes him by default Antifa by their own definition. Follow? So this guy was an Antifa supporter and sympathizer who went down there and shot all those people up. Now, what muddies the water is that one of the people he shot down there, it was actually his own sister. And so the left is trying to cover this up and going, oh, it was really about his sister. He went there to get his own sister. He went there to kill fascists because he said that's what he wanted to do, was kill a bunch of fascists and go to hell for it. He was a Satanist, a devil worshiper, and this is all things that he said about himself, and we have proof of that. So we know for a fact who he was. And the left would make you think that he shot up all those people down there not because of who he was, but because of some other circumstance. That who he was politically had nothing to do with the shooting. And then they want to take a guy that as far as I can tell, the only stuff we have on this guy out of El Paso is this 8chan thing. We don't really know who he was. Some are saying that he was a Democrat, that he was a lefty, and he made a switch at some point. Some are even claiming the switch was made for him post the event. We may never know what really motivated the shooter in El Paso, right? Unless the 8chan thing is legit. It could be legit. Explain to me how they figured that out. I don't know. But what concerns me as a guy who's just watching this go down from his front porch here in the Texas Outback, what's next? Because to me, this smacks of political tit-for-tat. It's unclear to me as an observer what the exact political motivation of and who the guy in El Paso was. But we know who the guy in Ohio, in Dayton, Ohio was. He was one of them, a radical, an incel, a leftist, a communist, and an Antifa supporter who hated all Trump supporters. Okay? So, I believe circumstantial evidence suggests this, and more in-depth investigation, if there was such a thing as investigation that's not tainted by politics these days, if there was a genuine bona fide investigation into this, it would uncover that this was a retaliatory strike against the El Paso shooting. Let me repeat this. The guy in Dayton, I'm convinced from my investigation into this that at least circumstantially it appears to me, I'd like a little more proof. I'd like a manifesto from him, right? But it appears to me that the El Paso shooting happened on Saturday morning. This guy was already planning to do something. He was just on the edge. He was just waiting for the right trigger. And he got triggered, no pun intended, by what happened in El Paso. And he went down there to tit for tat, to pay back. If you're going to go after us, we're going to go after you. Now, why he targeted that particular strip of nightclubs, I don't know. It seemed to me that was... I don't know. I don't know what his motivation was in that. I'd like to hear. I wish he left some kind of information, and maybe he did, and it'll all come to light. But I'm convinced it was a tit for tat. It was a repay. The guy in El Paso shoots up the Walmart full of immigrants, potentially, or at least Mexican Americans, Hispanic Americans, right? That's who lives in San Antonio. I'm sorry, not San Antonio too to some degree, but no, El Paso. And so the mainstream media finds this 8chan thing and says, it's cut and dried. He was a white nationalist. He's a Trump supporter, and he hated these people, and it's Trump's fault. And he went after them, and this was political. Okay? And maybe it was. Maybe it was. There's crazy people on both sides, right? There's crazy people on both sides of every argument. And so, but because they blew this up and immediately jumped to judgment, it was enough for this crazy person out of Ohio to go, that's it, I've had enough, it's my turn, I'm gonna, he did it, tit for tat, tit for tat. It reminds me of the famous scene from the movie Untouchables. If they bring a knife, you bring a gun. This is a quote from the movie. If they bring a knife, you bring a gun. If they put one of your guys in the hospital, you put two of their guys in the morgue. This is what's known as a war of attrition. This is what's known as a blood feud to a certain degree. You do one of ours, we do one of you. This is the way gangs fight back and forth. The Bloods hit the Crips hit the Bloods, and it just escalates and escalates till some point you get some kind of truce and things back off a little bit. Or they just keep escalating until they get out of control. So what we're having here is a back and forth. Let's go look at the history, the stuff they don't want you to talk about, the stuff that they think you've forgotten. And I'll pause here for a moment and say, please support this channel, P.O. Box 2915, Weatherford, Texas, 76086. This video, I will not make a penny from it, and I hope I don't get a strike from it for what I'm talking about. But let's go back in history and talk about the things they think we've forgotten. Let's talk about how a Antifa-supportive leftist guy, very much in the character of and political stance of the guy from Ohio that just did the most recent shooting. This guy went after, this has been what, 2 years ago? He went after our congressman, and he shot Steve Scalise, who will forever bear the scars of that attack. And that individual was put down by the Washington Capitol Police, who were there as security. Then we've got another one of our senators this time attacked in his own front yard by his own neighbor for political reasons. And it wasn't like this guy went over and punched a Nazi. No, this guy went over to our senator's home while he was mowing his lawn, right? And breaks 2 or 3 of his ribs, gives him a concussion, punctures his lung, and forces him to have surgery. He had to have surgery to repair the punctured lung. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's how I remember this, okay? So this is the left attacking us. I think at this point, the right hasn't really attacked back. We haven't, this thing in, the Christchurch shooting was clearly somebody trying to retaliate and start a civil war, and they were supposedly from the right, but that was not in America. Okay, in America, this may be the first one where somebody from the right, supposedly, if you believe the 8chan posting, right, went and did this thing in San Antonio. Or why do I keep saying San Antonio? El Paso. So, then there's Las Vegas. This is why I might get a strike. You can't talk about Las Vegas, right? So I'm going to talk in code. But they would have you to believe that that was just a nut job and that his targeting of a country music festival was random. It was not random. He selected the target. It was political. They are covering it up, just like they're trying to cover up the Ohio shooting and say it wasn't political. If anybody from the right, they don't even have to be from the right. They can kind of be not from the left and do something horrible, and the mainstream media will frame this as a Trump supporter on the rampage and a white nationalist, right? But when somebody from their side, who's clearly from their side, the guy from Vegas was a Trump hater, and he was videotaped at rallies wearing the vagina hat, right, saying impeach 45, okay? So this guy was a political actor. His intention was to attack Trump supporters. When he opened fire in Las Vegas, they were singing God Bless America. I swear that either right before or right after, right before the shooting, right? Or during the shooting, I think it was right before the shooting, right before he started shooting, they had just all had this candlelight moment where they were singing God Bless America or some patriotic song, I recall. And this is coming from witnesses at the time, that there was this candlelight visual moment where they honored the country right before this cat opened fire on that concert in Vegas, okay? But they would have you to believe he was just crazy and it was not politically motivated. See what they're doing here? It's kind of obvious to us. We see what they're doing. The big question is, what's next? What's next? We're seeing this tit-for-tat. Vegas, all these other things. And then finally, it looks like maybe somebody did this thing in El Paso. It might have been this murderous rampage. That coward might have been somebody that supposedly was from our side, from the right. What would it look like if sane people started engaging in warlike behavior? What happens when this civil war goes hot? First of all, we're seeing the crazies pop off first. The crazies from both sides, let's be honest. That's what's going to pop off first. We're probably going to see more of that. Tit for tat. They shoot up your place, you shoot up their place. They shoot up your people, you shoot up their people. And it goes back and forth as crazies individually pop off and take matters into their own hands. But what happens when more calculating people? What happens when more calculating people on the right start taking action? This attack on an ICE facility by Antifa in Tacoma, Washington was lame. The guy's attack was lame. It was almost like suicide by cop. Like, I don't know that he intended to get anything done. He didn't seem to be very successful in what he did, right? But what happens when more competent people with more training weigh in? Now, I want to say right here, I'm not calling for violence. I want to de-escalate this thing. I love America, and I love America the way it was before all of this hatred. There was once upon a time where I felt very comfortable interacting with African American people, strangers on the street, striking up conversations. I felt like we as a nation had so successfully banished most racism that any racists were banished to their closet, right? Like they wouldn't dare talk about racist things in public. And I don't know how we've gotten to where we are now from there, right? But I love America, so I'm not hoping for a civil war. I hope that we can find a way around this, that we can find a way to just all get along. Sorry, my dog bumped the tripod. Now, What's next? What happens when people with training and intellect start to make targeted moves? Well, let's look at the right first, because I feel like I know them better as far as what they might do. Once again, I am against any and all violence, and I'm simply predicting what we might expect, and I am not calling for any violence. I think it's not beyond the realm of possibilities that people from the right will start targeting certain government organizations that seem to be out of control. And I mean people who carry guns, so that it won't be a massacre of unarmed people by somebody with a weapon. That it'll be more like actual war. And probably the right will attack infrastructure more than human beings. So you can expect destruction to things that are important to infrastructure. Potentially government buildings of government agencies that have been traditionally out of control. Like, for instance, the FBI or the IRS. Okay? That, under Obama, the IRS was used as a political weapon. People have not forgotten that. That could potentially motivate potential attacks in the future. Same could be said about the FBI and their involvement in this coup against our president. That they are seen by many people on the right as the problem, as part of the problem, as the core of the coup and the anti-American sentiment. And so, although I think probably many members of the FBI are good folks, I mean, I don't want to put everybody in one basket, but at the same time, some of these organizations could potentially be targeted. If you look at true right-wing violence in the past, your mind springs, if you're a student of history, goes straight to Timothy McVeigh. The Oklahoma City bombing was, according to the mainstream narrative anyway, payback. Once again, tit for tat. It was payback for what the ATF did to the Branch Davidians in Waco. And that the P. Murrow Federal Building in Oklahoma City was in fact where most of the ATF agents and FBI agents from the debacle in Waco were actually from. They were from the Oklahoma office. So there's, a perfect example right there from all those years ago, from the beginning of the Civil War. It goes back to the 90s and the gun grab by the Clintons and the triggering of all those things that happened from Ruby Ridge and Waco. And so, yeah, if you look at the way that a right-winger attacks things, he went after the infrastructure. Now, the problem with McVeigh is that, he went there when it was during business hours, So I think that the right, if they were going to attack, would probably be more like that. It would look more like what McVeigh did, right, than either one of these, crazy people that are shooting unarmed people. That it might be more targeted coming from the right. And the left, the guy that targeted the congressman, you're going to probably see more stuff like that, where individuals who are talk show hosts, individuals who are public figures, who are pro-Trump, people that speak out for Trump, they're going to become targeted at their homes, in their businesses, in their daily lives. If I were a person like that, and I kind of am, I mean, I'm a tiny fish in a giant pond, but I am still here talking to you and politically active and motivated. So, we could see attacks against individuals on both sides. I guess I'm saying brace for what's to come. We cannot really comprehend what's coming. It's going to escalate. I don't see a way of de-escalation. It seemed like this was going to happen in the 90s, and then people just came to their senses, and we handled it with ballots, not bullets. But the bullets are flying now, from Las Vegas to Dayton, Ohio. That's kind of, for me, the beginnings, really from the baseball field shootings to the current moment and the current events. We're seeing an unbroken chain, I believe, of retribution, one side against the other. It's mostly been coming from the left so far, but that's probably going to change in the future. August 17th, watch that date. That's coming up. Big rally in Portland. Things could go awry there, as well as Antifa coming to El Paso on September 1st. Will they still come? I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments section. The lieutenant governor said, don't come to Texas, Antifa. You're not welcome in El Paso. Let's see what happens with that. I think these will be the next hot points. August 17th in Portland, September 1st in El Paso. Watch these events as we go further down the road towards civil war. God save our republic. God help us all. God save the innocents. And God protect us from ourselves.